Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone. I requested for assistance in having my slides presented. Sometimes I do get problems with my laptop. So what I'd like to share with everyone tonight is the environmental impact requirements and disaster risk reduction and management implications of the proposed PAREX. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, let's go into a little bit of a background. I'm not sure whether the other speakers have covered this earlier, but let me just go through this very quickly. Next slide. Okay, I'm not sure if the participants of this webinar are familiar. The PAREX is a 19.37 kilometer elevated 6-lane expressway. And as you can see on the map on the left side, it extends from C6 near Laguna, the Laguna Lake, all the way up to the mouth of the Pasig River in Intramuros. So that's the whole length, and the picture here on the right is coming from the materials from SMC, showing how that elevated 6-lane expressway might look like, when it is built along the Pasig River. Next slide, please. Okay, the objective is supposedly to improve traffic conditions in Metro Manila. Now, the picture here on the left shows that the expressway, the elevated expressway, is in the middle of the river, okay? And as you will see in the picture on the right, that's how it will look like if it were constructed in the middle of the river. The secondary objective is supposed to be to dredge the Pasig River to mitigate flooding and allow the operation of river ferries. Okay, next slide. There are 3 segments. Segment 1 is R10 to Plaza Azul, which is 5.74 kilometers. Segment 2 is San Juan River to C5, which is 7.32 kilometers. And segment 3 is C5 to C6, which is 6.3 kilometers. Again, the picture here just shows you how the elevated expressway might look like when it is built on the side of the Pasig River. Next slide. Now, let me go through the requirements of the environmental impact assessment. Okay, next. We have in the Philippines what is known as the Philippine Environmental Impact Statement System, or PEISS. It provides a systems-oriented approach to analyze and help in the management of environmental concerns vis-a-vis that of the National Development Program. It is a requirement. The EIA, the Environmental Impact Assessment, is a requirement. So a proponent of an infrastructure project similar to PAREX or any project of this magnitude they are required to conduct an EIA and secure an environmental compliance certificate, or ECC, prior to the implementation of the development projects that are classified as environmentally critical or those proposed to be located in environmentally critical areas. Now, take note, PAREX is an environmentally critical project, and at the same time, it is proposed to be located in an environmentally critical area, the Pasig River. Therefore, it requires both an EIA and an ECC. Now, the PEISS is a planning and decision-making tool. The essential purpose of the EIA process is to improve the decision-making and ensure that the project options under consideration are environmentally sound and sustainable. Next slide. Now, there is an accompanying law, Republic Act 10121, which is the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act. Now, this picture here on the left, this doesn't show you yet the PAREX. Okay, what is shown here is on one side where you see JP Rizal passing beside some of these tall buildings along the Pasig River. But the Republic Act 10121 specifically relates to the risks, the disaster risks that are involved in the construction of infrastructure projects. Its objective is to guide how sustainable development can be achieved through inclusive growth while building adaptive capacities of communities. Another objective is to increase the resiliency of vulnerable sectors of society, particularly the urban poor, the women, the children, the handicapped, the elderly. And also to optimize disaster mitigation opportunities with the end in view of promoting people's welfare and security. This third bullet point is very important because this is what specifically relates to PAREX. Next slide. Now, the disaster risk reduction and management and climate change adaptation is built into the EIS system, where natural hazards and the related risks are considered as a fundamental first step. Please take note, it's a fundamental first step in project scoping, and the findings should be used to determine if disaster risks should be examined further in other components of the project appraisal process. Okay, please take note of the wordings of this because this is very important in the sequence of approval. Next slide, please. It is also a systematic analysis of the potential disaster risk-related consequences of a project via its impact on the environment, and this should be included as a central component of the assessment process, especially in hazard-prone areas. So therefore, the PAREX should go through this process because it is a critically, a critical environmental project. It is in a critically sensitive area. Okay, next slide. The DRRM CCA consideration in the EIS system involves certain measures to address identified environmental issues, including the disaster risks, the concerns, the threats that may happen, okay? And this should be incorporated in the final design and implementation of the project. Okay, next slide. Now, take a look at this. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. Screening, which is to determine whether a proposed project is covered by the PEISS, because there are some projects, especially small ones, and those that are not located in environmentally critical areas, which do not need to go through the PEISS, okay? So that's why in the first step, it involves the determination whether the project needs to be covered by the PEISS, okay? Second is the scoping, the identification of the key issues and corresponding impact that the EIA should focus on, or meaning what should be assessed, what should be studied. And then the impact analysis is the third step. And then after analyzing what the potential impacts are, what are, number 4 is what are the mitigation measures? How do you prevent, reduce, or eliminate the risks of disasters? You now go to phase 5, where you prepare a report, okay? And then you submit this report to EMB, Environmental Management Bureau of DENR, who does a review of the EIA and does the project appraisal. So it examines the completeness of the report, the adequacy and appropriateness of the elements or the contents of the report. And then if it is given an approval, then the project can be constructed, but you still have to go through monitoring. The project, even though it may already be approved, even though it may be completed, it will have to be monitored because there are conditions that may be attached to its implementation and operations and maintenance. So take note, there are 7 steps in the process. Next slide. Now, let's go through the checklist for road and bridge projects. And this is really part of the first 2 steps in that process. One of the considerations is land, consistency with the surrounding land uses. Okay, is the proposed project consistent with the surrounding land uses? What is the effect of the project to the wildlife, if there are wildlife in the area? Okay. What is the impact of the project in terms of the landform or topography or the terrain? Is it going to alter this? How will it affect the landform, the terrain? Is there a potential for soil erosion? Is there a potential for soil and land contamination? For example, if it's an industrial plant, for example, that may be producing toxic waste, then that may produce some land contamination. Is it encroaching into protected areas or ecologically sensitive areas? Okay, so I think we can see, again, in the picture here on the right, this is where the proposed PAREX meanders from one side, the Makati side, going to the Buendia side, I mean to the Mandaluyong side, as it moves towards Manila. So we can say that based on the information that's available in the website of SMC about PAREX, that it encroaches on the Pasig River. Another consideration is the project going to impair the visual aesthetics of the area? Some of you may recall the controversial Torre de Manila, for example, in downtown Manila. Is the project going to devalue the land? How will it affect the land value in the vicinity? Okay, so these are the considerations regarding land. Next slide. We also, how will it affect water? Will it increase siltation due to project activities, let's say during construction? Will it affect, will it contribute to the siltation of the river? How about the water quality? Also, will there be competition in water use? There are some projects that extract water from underground, and so there might be, or it might be tapping into water lines and therefore affecting the water supply of the neighborhood. Is this project going to deplete or has the potential of depleting existing water resources? And then also, is there the risk of the project contributing to the occurrence of flooding? Then also, another consideration is with regard to air and noise. Is the air quality going to improve or be degraded? You can just imagine if you have an expressway beside your house and it's elevated, you get all the fumes. Also, the noise. will the project be generating noise? Okay, next slide. Another consideration, and this is probably most important, is what is the effect on people? Is it going to displace residents in the project site and the vicinity? Will it enhance employment and livelihood? Will it reduce employment or livelihood? Will it increase or decrease the revenue of the LGU where the project is located? How about disruption or competition in the delivery of public services like education, healthcare? Is the project going to affect that or enhance it? How about traffic volume? Will it alleviate or will it worsen traffic flow? And then how will it impact on community health and safety, including the disaster risks? So these are the considerations for people in doing the EIA. Next slide. Next slide. So what are the DRRM implications? Next slide. Here I'd like to discuss particularly earthquakes. And I'd like to refer to the findings of the Metro Manila Earthquake Impact Risk Study, or MIRES, that was conducted by JICA together with MMDA in 2004. According to the MIRES study, they expect a magnitude 7 earthquake to hit any time since the report came out in 2004, because the recurrence interval of earthquakes, particularly the West Valley Fault, is 400 to 500 years. And it is now 363 years since the last earthquake. And so therefore, what the report is saying, we can have what they refer to as the big one anytime now. Now, if we do get a magnitude 7 earthquake, it is estimated that 170,000 buildings will collapse in Metro Manila. About 340,000 will be damaged and 52,000 people will die. The picture on the right is the Hyatt Hotel in Baguio. And I'm showing this because the intensity of that earthquake is over 7. Next slide. Also, the study of 2004 mentions that the magnitude 7 earthquake will cause Metro Manila to split into 4 sections: north of the Pasig and west of the Valley Fault. North of the Pasig and west of the Valley Fault, that will be Caloocan, Navotas, Malabon, part of City of Manila, San Juan, Mandaluyong. Okay, that's west of the Valley Fault. Second is the north of the Pasig, east of the Valley Fault. That's Marikina, that's Quezon City, that's Pasig, Pateros. And then number 3, south of the Pasig, west of the Valley Fault. That will be the lower part of Manila, Pasay, Parañaque, etc., Muntinlupa. Okay, and then south of the Pasig, east of the Valley Fault, that's Taguig mainly. Okay. Now, the roads running north and south will become impassable because these are the roads that cross the Pasig River. By the way, the picture here on the right is from the from the Osaka earthquake. I'll explain that later. Next slide, please. Now, one of the findings of the study is that the rapid urbanization in Metro Manila has resulted in unsatisfactory infrastructure construction, poor housing conditions, highly dense areas, all of which have high potentials for disaster. We know very well that there are many structures in Metro Manila that do not have proper building permits. Right? So this, in case of an earthquake, especially of a magnitude 7, a lot of these buildings are going to collapse. Also, because of the large population of low-income households, the vulnerability to disaster is a very pressing issue. Next slide, please. Now, let me go to the Baguio earthquake of 1990. As I mentioned, this had a higher than 7, it was a 7.8 magnitude earthquake that lasted for 45 seconds. It killed 1,600 people. It affected actually 15 provinces. And the tremor was felt as far as Cubao. And it created a 125-kilometer ground rupture from the province of Aurora to Nueva Vizcaya. Again, here a picture of the Hyatt Hotel in Baguio when it collapsed. Next slide, please. Another picture of the Baguio earthquake. Next. Now I'd like to turn to the Kobe earthquake of 1995. This was a magnitude 7.3. It killed 6,443 people, destroyed 240,000 houses, and made 45,000 people homeless. Estimated damage was over $100 billion. You can see here the elevated expressway that fell down. Okay? And this was the result of an east-west strike slip, which is part of the Eurasian and Philippine plates. When the Eurasian and Philippine plates interact, it causes this kind of shifting. And so we are prone to this kind of a slip fault. Next slide. Just some additional photos from the Kobe earthquake. Again, this is the elevated expressway. Next. Not only did the elevated expressway fall down, it also caused fire all over Kobe. So you see, there was a split of the in the joint of the elevated expressway, and so there were a lot of vehicles that fell down. Next slide, please. Okay, I just want to draw some conclusions now. Next. So, as I mentioned, PAREX is an environmentally sensitive project and proposed to be located in an environmentally critical area. It therefore requires to conduct an EIA and to secure an ECC before it can be constructed. Now, it has been in the news that PAREX has been approved by government. Actually, if you remember the 7-step in the EIA process, they are only in number 2. So how can they be approved if they only are in number 2? Meaning they are still at the scoping stage. Another conclusion is therefore PAREX has very high environmental and social risks. So from an environmental impact assessment perspective, the question is, does the intended economic benefits of PAREX outweigh its social and environmental risks? I stop my presentation at this point and will try to answer questions if you have any. Thank you very much.